Dr. Franklin Hurst snatched the stethoscope from Monica's neck mid-sentence, yanked it so hard the clasp snapped and left a red welt across her skin. He threw it on the floor. Then he grabbed the termination letter from the counter, shoved it against her chest and said through his teeth, "You are done. You are finished. And if you touch another patient in this hospital, I will have you arrested." His face was 2 inches from hers, veins bulging, hands shaking with the thrill of it. A man drunk on power. A nurse fired for saving a life. That's when the helicopters came. Before we go any further, if this story already has your blood boiling, hit that subscribe button right now and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. The termination letter was a single page. 1 page to end 14 years. Monica Stewart stood at the nurse's station on the 4th floor of Mercy Heights Hospital and read it for the 3rd time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. The language was clean, clinical, almost polite, the way bad news always sounded when a lawyer had written it first. Failure to adhere to established medical protocols. Unauthorized administration of treatment. Risk to patient safety and hospital liability. Every line was a small, neat knife. She folded it in half and pushed it into the front pocket of her scrubs. Around her, the floor hummed with the ordinary rhythm of a Tuesday evening. Call lights blinked. A cart squeaked down the hallway. Someone's family member was crying softly in room 412, and the sound drifted past the station like smoke. None of it had changed. The world had not registered that anything was wrong. Her colleague and closest friend, Denise Park, appeared at her elbow with a cup of coffee she hadn't asked for and set it down without a word. That was Denise, 22 years in nursing, and she still communicated entire paragraphs through silence and coffee placement. She leaned against the counter and glanced at Monica's pocket, at the outline of the folded letter. "He really did it," Denise said quietly. "He really did it. After what you did for Mr. Callahan last night." Monica picked up the coffee. It was too hot, and she drank it anyway. "Apparently that's exactly why he did it." Denise shook her head slowly. There was a long pause, the kind that held something unsaid inside it. Then she said, "What are you going to fight this? Union rep? Legal?" "I don't know yet." "Monica." "I said I don't know yet, Denise." Her voice came out sharper than she intended, and she felt the familiar tension crawl up the back of her neck. She set the cup down. "I'm sorry, I just need to finish this shift. I need to finish it like a professional, and then I'll figure out the rest." Denise nodded once. "Okay, but for the record, what you did for that man was extraordinary. You know that." Monica said nothing. She pulled up the patient chart on the screen in front of her and started reviewing evening medications. What had happened the night before was not complicated, not really, not if you understood medicine the way Monica understood it. Mr. Raymond Callahan, 67 years old, post-bypass surgery, had crashed suddenly in his room. His pressure had dropped so fast that by the time the attending physician was paged and responded, there would have been nothing left to save. Monica had recognized the signs of a rare post-surgical tamponade, fluid pressing against his heart, squeezing the life out of it. She had the knowledge. She had done the procedure before, not in a hospital, not with the clean lighting and sterilized tools and legal protections that Mercy Heights offered. She had done it in a tent in the middle of nowhere, with a flashlight and sheer will on a soldier who would have died in the next 4 minutes. She had not waited for approval. She had performed an emergency pericardiocentesis, guided by her own training and a portable ultrasound the unit happened to have, and she had pulled the fluid off that man's heart and watched his pressure climb back to safety as the attending physician walked through the door, wide-eyed, too late to have mattered. Mr. Callahan was alive. He was in room 408 right now, watching a baseball game and complaining that the pudding was too sweet. And Monica Stewart had a termination letter in her pocket. She was still standing at the station, working through charts, when Dr. Hurst returned. She heard him before she saw him. His shoes made a particular sound on the linoleum, a precise, self-important click, and everyone on the floor seemed to register it the way prey registered the sound of something large moving through tall grass. He stopped at the station. He did not look at her the way a person looks at another person. He looked at her the way someone looks at a problem they have already solved. "Stewart, I trust you received the documentation." She turned to face him. She kept her expression neutral. 14 years of emergency nursing had taught her to manage her face the same way she managed a code. Stay calm, speak clearly, do not telegraph panic. "I received it." "Good. I'll need your badge and your access card at the end of your shift. HR will send you the formal separation paperwork by Friday." "Dr. Hurst." She said his name the way you might say the name of a street you were trying to find. Flat. Factual. "Raymond Callahan is alive today." "That is not in question." "Then what is?" He clasped his hands behind his back. He was 60, maybe 61, with the kind of face that had never been uncertain about anything. "What is in question, Ms. Stewart, is whether this hospital can maintain its standard of care when individual nurses decide to practice medicine independently, without physician oversight, based on their own judgment." His heart was being compressed by fluid. That is a retrospective diagnosis. It was a real-time emergency. There are protocols for real-time emergencies. She looked at him. She let a beat of silence sit there between them, long enough to mean something. The protocol would have let him die. Something flickered in Hurst's face. Not conscience, not guilt. Something closer to irritation at being made to feel those things. He straightened. "Your access ends at the close of this shift. I suggest you spend the time saying your goodbyes." He turned and clicked away down the hallway. Denise appeared again at her shoulder. "I hate that man," she said softly. "So do I," Monica said, "but that doesn't change anything." She pulled up the next chart. For the next 3 hours, she worked. She worked with the same thoroughness she had brought to every shift for 14 years. Because the patients deserved that. Because the work was the work regardless of what was happening to her on the edges of it. She checked vitals. She updated records. She held Mrs. Peterson's hand in room 415 while the woman talked about her late husband and the garden she couldn't tend anymore because her knees had gone bad. Monica listened, really listened, because that was what the job required, and because she understood, somewhere deep in herself, that some things mattered more than the official record of them. She stopped at room 408 near the end of her shift. Mr. Callahan was not watching baseball anymore. He was sitting up in bed with the remote in his lap, and he looked at her when she came in with the same eyes he'd had when he'd opened them after she was done, disoriented, grateful, not quite sure why he was still here. "I heard," he said before she could speak. "Mr. Callahan, I just came to. I heard what they did." His voice was rough. He had the kind of voice that had come from decades of outdoor work and cigarettes and talking over engines. "My daughter, she's a nurse over at St. Vincent's. She's got friends here. Word gets around." Monica stood near the foot of his bed. "I appreciate you saying that. You don't need to thank me for saying the truth." He looked at her steadily. "You saved my life. I did my job. They're saying you broke protocol. I did that too." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My wife died in a hospital 6 years ago. She was there 3 days before anyone figured out what was actually wrong, and by then it was too late. They had their protocols too." He paused. "I'm glad you were the one in the hallway last night." Monica stood very still. In 14 years, she had learned not to let the weight of these moments collapse her. You carried them. You put them somewhere that didn't interfere with the next thing that needed doing. But this one was harder to put away. "Take care of yourself," she said. "Follow up with cardiology. Don't skip appointments." "Yes, ma'am." She turned to go. "Ms. Stewart," she stopped. He was looking at her with something that was either sympathy or admiration, or both. Whatever comes next for you, I hope it's worthy of you. She left before she said something she couldn't take back. The break room was empty when she got there. She sat down at the table and put her face in her hands for exactly 30 seconds. She allowed herself that. 30 seconds. Then she straightened, rolled her neck, and started drafting a mental list. Union rep in the morning, call the nursing board. Look into wrongful termination precedents. She had seen nurses fight these things before and lose, but she had also seen nurses fight them and win. She was not going to walk out of Mercy Heights quietly. She was not built for quiet. She was still sitting there when her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it. Unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail. She didn't know why she didn't. Some instinct she couldn't name. The same instinct that had made her pick up a needle and saved Raymond Callahan's heart. She answered. Is this Monica Stewart? The voice on the other end was crisp, controlled, with the particular flatness of someone trained to deliver information under pressure. Speaking. Miss Stewart, this is Lieutenant Colonel James Reeves with the United States Army Medical Command. I need to ask you where you are located right now. She blinked. Excuse me? Your physical location, Miss Stewart. We have you at Mercy Heights Hospital. Can you confirm that? She stood up slowly from the chair. Who is this? My name is Lieutenant Colonel James Reeves. I apologize for the abruptness. This is a time-sensitive situation. Are you currently on the premises of Mercy Heights Hospital in Cedar Falls? Yes. The word came out before she fully decided to say it. Good. Do not leave. We are approximately 11 minutes out. Someone will explain everything when we arrive. When you arrive, she repeated it. What does that mean? Who is we? 11 minutes, Miss Stewart. Please stay where you are. The line went dead. She stood in the break room with her phone in her hand and a silence she couldn't interpret pressing in from every direction. Her first thought was that it was some kind of mistake. Wrong Monica Stewart. There had to be thousands of them. Her second thought was that it wasn't a mistake because he had placed her here, at this hospital, by name, and something in his voice had not left room for error. She went back out to the floor. Denise was at the station, charting. She looked up. You okay? You look like you've seen something. I just got a very strange phone call. Strange how? Army, some lieutenant colonel, said don't leave, we'll be there in 11 minutes. Denise stared at her. The Army. That's what he said, a beat. Monica, did you do something? I saved a man's heart with a needle. Apparently that's a recurring problem for me. She looked down the hallway. I need to think for a second. Should you call someone? I don't know what I'd tell them. 7 minutes later, she heard it. It started as a vibration more than a sound. Something felt in the sternum before it registered in the ears. And then it grew. The deep percussion of rotor blades, massive and close. And the windows at the end of the hall began to tremble in their frames. Someone at the far end of the corridor stopped walking. A physician stepped out of a room with a chart in hand and looked up at the ceiling. An orderly with a medication cart froze in the middle of the hallway. One of the younger nurses at the station said, "What is that?" in a voice that was trying very hard to sound calm. The sound got bigger. Then the PA system crackled, and the overhead voice of hospital security, dry and professional, said, "Attention, all staff. We have unscheduled aircraft landing on the roof helipad. All non-essential personnel, please clear the stairwells and elevator corridors leading to the roof. Repeat, please clear all access points to the rooftop level." Denise turned to Monica. Monica was already looking at the ceiling. Within 4 minutes, the hallway outside the fourth-floor nurses' station went from the ordinary controlled motion of a Tuesday evening hospital to something else entirely. The elevator opened and 2 figures in military uniform stepped out, moving with the kind of purpose that made everyone around them slow down and get out of the way. They were followed by 2 more, then a 5th, then a 6th. They were not running, but they moved like people for whom not running was an act of restraint. The one in front was tall, with close-cropped silver hair and a jaw like a sentence that had already been decided. He carried a tablet. His eyes moved through the hallway with the efficient scan of someone used to reading rooms in seconds. He looked at Monica. He stopped. Monica Stewart. It was not a question. She stood her ground. Yes. I'm Lieutenant Colonel James Reeves. We spoke on the phone. He didn't extend a hand. I need about 30 seconds of your time to explain the situation, and then I'm going to need you to make a decision. Can we do that? She was aware of Denise beside her. She was aware of everyone on the floor watching. She was aware of the termination letter still folded in her scrubs pocket. 30 seconds, she said. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. Do you remember Captain Daniel Holt? Everything in her went very still. She knew that name. She hadn't spoken it aloud in 7 years, but she knew it the way she knew her own heartbeat. What about him? Her voice came out even. She didn't know how. He's on the helicopter, Reeves said. He has approximately 40 minutes, maybe less. And the procedure that can save him is one that, according to every record we have, only one person in the country has ever performed successfully under combat conditions. He looked at her without flinching. That's you, Miss Stewart, so I need you to decide, right now. Monica looked at the ceiling. She looked at Denise, who was staring at her with an expression she had never seen on that face before. She looked at the termination letter's outline in her pocket. Then she looked at Reeves. What are we dealing with? She said. His face changed, not with relief, with recognition. Like he had known, before he arrived, before the phone call, before any of this, that she was going to say yes. We'll brief you on the way up, he said. And Monica Stewart, who had just lost her job for saving one man's life, turned and walked toward the elevator, toward the sound of the rotors, toward whatever was waiting for her on that roof, carrying nothing but 14 years of knowledge and a single folded page that suddenly didn't matter at all. Dr. Franklin Hurst snatched the stethoscope from Monica's neck mid-sentence, yanked it so hard the clasp snapped and left a red welt across her skin. He threw it on the floor. Then he grabbed the termination letter from the counter, shoved it against her chest, and said through his teeth, "You are done. You are finished. And if you touch another patient in this hospital, I will have you arrested." His face was 2 inches from hers, veins bulging, hands shaking with the thrill of it, a man drunk on power, a nurse fired for saving a life. That's when the helicopters came. The elevator doors closed behind them, and the floor dropped away. Monica stood between Reeves and a soldier she hadn't been introduced to, a younger man with a medical patch on his sleeve, and the tight expression of someone who had been awake for too long. The elevator climbed. The rotor sound grew. She could feel it now in her teeth, in her jaw, in the bones of her hands. "Talk," she said. Reeves was already pulling something up on his tablet. Captain Daniel Holt, 39 years old, Special Operations, 14 years of service. He turned the screen toward her. A photo. A man she recognized, though the photograph was recent and the face was older than the one she remembered. Harder, more settled into itself, the way faces get when they've carried something heavy for a long time. She kept her expression neutral. What happened to him? Training exercise gone wrong outside Fort Benning. 46 hours ago, blunt thoracic trauma, hemothorax, and what our flight surgeon is calling a progressive constrictive injury around the pericardium. He's been stabilized twice. He's destabilizing again. Reeves lowered the tablet. Our people tried a standard pericardiocentesis 3 hours ago. It bought him time, but didn't resolve it. The anatomy is compromised. There's scarring, previous adhesions, and the approach that works by the textbook is not working. Why isn't he in a military hospital? He was. Fort Benning's surgical team has done everything they can. They've consulted Johns Hopkins. They've consulted Mayo. The consensus is that the conventional approach has been exhausted, and the risk of open surgery in his current condition is close to 90% mortality. The elevator stopped. The doors opened, and the sound hit her like a wall. She stepped out into the corridor leading to the rooftop access door and raised her voice over the noise. "What do you know about what I did in Kandahar?" Reeves kept pace beside her. "We know you performed a modified surgical pericardiotomy on a Sergeant Marcus Webb under combat conditions in 2011. No imaging, no surgical suite, minimal equipment. He survived. He's still serving. That procedure was improvised. I developed it on the spot based on the anatomy I found when I opened him up. I've never done it twice." "I know." "Then you know I can't guarantee." "I know you can't guarantee anything," Reeves said sharply, without slowing down. "I also know that Daniel Holt has maybe 40 minutes, and you are the only person in this country who has ever done what needs to be done. So guarantees are not what I'm asking for." He pushed the rooftop access door open. The wind and noise exploded through it. He turned to her in the doorway. "I'm asking for you." She looked at him. She thought about the termination letter. Then she walked through the door. The rooftop was controlled chaos, the kind that had its own internal logic if you knew how to read it. 2 Black Hawk helicopters sat on the pad, rotors still turning on one of them. Personnel moved between them with equipment cases and communication gear. A medic she didn't know caught her eye and pointed toward the second aircraft. Reeves leaned close to her ear. "Flight time to the forward medical staging area is 22 minutes. Dr. Patricia Osei is on the ground there. She's your surgical support. Everything you've requested in terms of equipment, tell me now." Monica stopped walking. "I haven't agreed to anything yet." He stopped too. He turned to face her fully. Around them, everything kept moving. "What do you need to agree?" It was a real question, not sarcastic, not impatient. He was actually asking. She thought about Daniel Holt. She thought about a tent in Kandahar and a flashlight held by a 22-year-old private who was shaking so hard the beam trembled on the surgical field. She thought about the sound a heart makes when the pressure on it releases, and it suddenly has room to work again. That single, lurching beat, like a door swinging open. "Nothing," she said. "Let's go." They moved. She climbed into the Black Hawk, and a crew member handed her a headset before she'd fully settled into the seat. The rotors changed pitch. The aircraft lifted. Below her, Mercy Heights Hospital shrank, then disappeared. The medic with the tired eyes sat across from her. He had a name tape that said Kowalski. He leaned forward and said through the headset, "I've been with Captain Holt since Benning. I can brief you on everything we've tried." "Go," she said. He went. He was thorough and fast, the way good field medics talked. No wasted words, no false modesty about what they didn't know. He laid out the timeline of Holt's injury, the interventions, the responses, the point at which each approach had stopped working, and why. He pulled up imaging on a small portable screen and held it toward her. She studied it as the helicopter moved through the dark. The scarring was significant. She could see it even on the small screen, the white thickening around the pericardium, the way previous procedures had layered adhesion on top of adhesion until the tissue had become a problem in itself. Standard drainage wasn't going to work. They'd already proven that. What she had done in Kandahar, the approach she'd never named, never written up, never submitted for publication because she'd been told in no uncertain terms by her commanding officer to keep her mouth shut and her after-action report clean, was not really a standard procedure at all. It was something she had invented in the moment, a combination of surgical drainage and manual manipulation of the pericardial sac that required a specific angle of entry and a specific sequence of release that she had worked out based on nothing more than what she could feel under her hands. She had described it once, afterward, to another combat medic. He'd said, "That's not a real thing." She'd said, "It worked." He'd said, "That doesn't make it a real thing." She'd said, "Tell that to Marcus Webb." She handed the screen back to Kowalski. His blood pressure right now? 78/50 when we lifted, probably lower by now. How's his mentation? In and out, mostly out for the last hour. She nodded slowly. The math was not good. The math was, in fact, terrible. 78/50 with a compromised pericardium and progressive restriction was a man running on whatever reserve his body had left. And that reserve had a bottom. What's his pain management situation? Minimal. We're trying to keep him conscious enough to maintain airway. That has to change when I go in. I need him under. Dr. Osei has anesthesia support on the ground. Good. She leaned back, closed her eyes for 10 seconds. Not to sleep, to go through it. The sequence, the angles, the feel of the tissue under her hands, and the specific resistance she'd encountered in the moment, the exact moment, she'd made the call to deviate from everything she'd been trained to do and follow something she couldn't have named at the time. Instinct wasn't the right word. Knowledge was closer. The kind of knowledge that lives in the hands rather than the head. She opened her eyes. Reeves was watching her from across the cabin. "You're running through it," he said. "Yes." "Good." She looked at him directly. "I want to be clear about something, Colonel. If I do this, I'm doing it my way. No observer is going to stop me mid-procedure because I'm not following a protocol they recognize. No one calls it in the middle. If I open him up and I find what I think I'm going to find, you give me the room to work." "Agreed. I want that in writing." He almost smiled. "You'll have it on the ground, and when this is over, whatever happens, I want full disclosure on what was in that after-action report from Kandahar. The real one, not the version my CO cleaned up." She watched his face. "Because I know there was a real one, and I know something in it scared someone enough that I got a very quiet, very firm suggestion to never discuss what I did in that tent with anyone who mattered." Something moved across Reeves's expression. It was brief and controlled, but she caught it. "We can discuss that after," he said. "No, that's part of the agreement. After the procedure, whatever the outcome, I get the full file." He was quiet for 4 seconds. She counted. "Agreed," he said. She turned back to the window. Beneath them, lights moved past in the dark. Kowalski said quietly, "Can I ask you something, Miss Stewart?" "Go ahead." "Were you scared in Kandahar when you did it the first time?" She thought about it honestly, the way the question deserved. "I was scared before I started. Once I started, I wasn't anything. There wasn't room for it." He nodded. He seemed to find that satisfying. The helicopter banked. Kowalski's radio crackled, and he pressed his earpiece hard, and his face changed. He looked at Monica. Holt's pressure just dropped again, 61/40. She straightened. "How far out are we?" He was already talking into the radio. He looked up. 9 minutes. 9 minutes. She did the calculation and didn't share what it produced. "Tell them to keep him warm, keep him flat, and do not attempt any additional drainage. Whatever they're thinking about doing right now, they stop and they wait for me." She said it clearly and calmly, the way you say a thing that has to be heard correctly the first time. "If they touch him before I get there, they will make it worse. I need them to trust me." Kowalski relayed it word for word. There was a pause on the other end. Then a woman's voice came back, controlled and precise, that had to be Osei. "Tell her I understand, and tell her to hurry." The aircraft descended. Monica pressed her hands flat on her thighs and felt the familiar thing. The thing that had been there since Kandahar, since long before Kandahar, since the first time she'd ever understood that her hands were capable of something her mind hadn't fully caught up to yet. A steadiness, a clarity, not confidence, because confidence was about outcomes. And she never promised herself outcomes. Something else, readiness. The wheels touched down, the door opened before the rotors had fully slowed, and she was moving before Reeves had gotten to his feet. The staging area was set up inside a hangar structure, portable surgical lighting already positioned. equipment laid out with the organized precision of a team that had been preparing for her arrival. A woman in surgical scrubs came forward immediately, mid-40s, with natural hair pulled back tight and eyes that sized Monica up in one glance without condescension. "Patricia Osei," she said, extending a gloved hand. "I've read everything Reeves sent me about Kandahar." "Then you know it's not in any textbook." "I know. I've been filling in the gaps with anatomy and prayer." A beat. "He's crashing slowly. Slower than I expected, honestly. He's fighting." "He always fought," Monica said, and didn't explain that. They walked fast. "I have ultrasound positioned. I have your entry angles pre-mapped based on the imaging, and I have anesthesia standing by. Dr. Ferris, he's good. He's done field work. He won't panic." Osei pulled on a second glove. "Tell me what you need from me that I can't anticipate." "When I go in manually, I'm going to need you on retraction, specifically on the inferior pericardial surface. The adhesions are going to resist, and I cannot let them tear. If they tear, we lose him in under 2 minutes." Osei nodded. "I can do that. I'm going to talk out loud while I work. Everything I'm feeling under my hands, I'm going to say. Don't interpret it as distress. It's how I map the field when I can't fully see it." "Understood." "And Patricia," Monica stopped walking. She looked at her. "If I tell you to hold, you hold. If I tell you to release, you release. No hesitation, no second guessing. I know how it looks from the outside. It looks wrong. I need you to trust that it's right." Osei held her gaze. "I've spent the last 3 hours watching 3 other very good surgeons fail to save this man. I trust you." She paused. "Now let's go." Daniel Holt was on the table. Monica had prepared herself. She had told herself in the helicopter that she was ready for what she was going to see. But the human body has a way of resisting preparation, of insisting on being real, even when you've tried to make it abstract. He was pale in the way people get when they've been losing the fight slowly. His face was slack, his breathing shallow and uneven. But he was breathing. His heart was beating. He was still here. She moved to the side of the table. She looked at his face for exactly 3 seconds. Then she looked away, toward the instruments, toward the imaging screen, toward Osei across from her, and Ferris at the head of the table, and Kowalski positioned against the wall, watching with his hands clasped, not interfering, just present. "I'm ready," she said. Ferris said, "Taking him under now." The monitors shifted as the medication went in. Holt's body settled. His breathing changed to the ventilator's rhythm. Monica picked up the first instrument. Her hands were steady. They were always steady once she started. She worked in silence for the first 4 minutes, mapping what she could see against what she'd memorized from the imaging, building the 3-dimensional picture in her mind that would guide the part of this that no imaging could show her. The entry point was exactly where she'd expected it to be. The first layer of adhesion was worse than the images had suggested. Adhesion on the anterior surface, dense, approximately 3 centimeters superior to my entry, retracting manually. Osei moved precisely. No wasted motion. "There," Monica said. "Hold that." The monitor above her showed a blip, then another. Ferris said quietly, "Pressure's 63. She worked deeper. "Second adhesion layer. This one's older. This is from something that happened to him before the training accident." She didn't stop moving. "Has he had previous chest trauma?" Kowalski's voice from the wall. "IED, 2019. He was cleared for return to duty." "He shouldn't have been." She said it without judgment, just fact. "This tissue never fully resolved." The monitor spiked. "Pressure dropping," Ferris said. 58. "I see it. Do not adjust. Do not push fluids yet. Give me 90 seconds. "Monica," Osei started. 90 seconds, Patricia. Trust me." Osei went quiet. Monica's hands moved through something she could not see and could only feel, the way a blind person reads a face. And she found what she was looking for, the specific point of maximum restriction. the place where Kandahar had taught her that the body was asking for release in a language that had no written form. She made the adjustment. The table was silent. The monitor beeped once, then again. Then it steadied. Ferris said, in a voice that was trying very hard to stay clinical, "Pressure is 68, 71, 74. Nobody moved. 79, Ferris said. Osei exhaled once, short and controlled. 83, Ferris said. 86. Monica kept working, the structural repair, the drainage, the closure. Step by deliberate step, her hands doing what her hands knew, the knowledge that lived below thought, below training, below the reach of any committee or protocol, board, or man with a termination letter. 22 minutes later, she stepped back. She looked at the monitors. Daniel Holt's pressure was 94/62 and climbing. His heart was doing the thing hearts are supposed to do. It had room now. It had been given back its room. She pulled off her gloves. The room was very quiet. Kowalski had his fist pressed against his mouth. His eyes were bright. Osei was looking at Monica with an expression that wasn't quite awe, but was the thing just before it. "What you just did," she said slowly, "I have never seen anything like that in 20 years of surgery." Monica dropped the gloves in the waste container. "Get him to post-op. Watch the drainage output every 15 minutes. If it increases past 30 cubic centimeters, you call me immediately." "Of course, but Monica." Osei stepped around the table. "That procedure, you need to write that down." "I know. Not someday. Now. Tonight. Because what you just did in there is going to save lives. And if it only lives in your hands, then the day something happens to you—" "I know," Monica said again, quieter. "I know." She walked out of the surgical area. Reeves was waiting outside the door. He was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and when he saw her face, he straightened. "He's stable," she said. Reeves closed his eyes, just for a moment. When he opened them, something in his face had shifted. Something that had been locked down very tightly had released slightly, and Monica understood for the first time that this was not just a mission for him. "He means something to you," she said. Reeves looked at the floor. "He saved my son's life in Fallujah. 2007. He said it flatly, like a fact, like something he had decided long ago not to be emotional about and was mostly succeeding. I've owed him something I couldn't repay ever since." Monica leaned against the wall beside him. The adrenaline was beginning to recede, and in its place was the particular exhaustion that followed the kind of work that uses everything, not just the body, but the deepest part of the thinking, the part that doesn't know how to rest. "You said I'd get the file," she said. "You'll get the file. Tonight." He looked at her sideways. "You're not going to let that go. I spent 7 years not asking questions I should have asked. A man nearly died tonight because a procedure I developed was buried by someone who decided it was inconvenient." She kept her voice level. "So no, I'm not going to let it go." Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded once. "Tonight," he said. She looked at the closed door of the surgical room, where somewhere behind it Daniel Holt's heart was beating, with room to beat in, and she thought about Mr. Callahan in room 408, watching baseball, complaining about pudding, alive and unaware of the thread of connection between his survival and this one, between this hangar and a tent in Kandahar 12 years ago, between every life she had ever reached into the dark and pulled back. And she thought about the termination letter still folded in her scrubs pocket. And she understood something she had not understood fully until this moment. Franklin Hurst had fired her this morning, and tonight she had done the only thing in the world she had ever been truly built to do. Whatever came next, she was not the same person who had stood at that nurse's station, holding a single page that tried to define her. That woman had been shrinking under the weight of a system that couldn't hold what she was. This woman, the one standing in a military hangar with the smell of the surgical field still on her, this woman was done shrinking. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. Unknown number again, different from before. She answered. Miss Stewart, the voice was older, measured, not military, something else, something with money in it and weight, and the particular quality of a person who was not accustomed to asking. My name is William Carver. I believe we need to have a conversation about what happened tonight, about what happened in Kandahar in 2011, and about why the after-action report you've been asking about has been sitting in a classified file for the past 7 years. A pause. And I think you already know why. Monica's hand tightened on the phone. Reeves was watching her. He had heard her tone shift. He took a step toward her. She held up one finger. Wait, who are you? She said into the phone. Someone who made a very serious mistake 7 years ago, Carver said, and someone who is about to try to correct it. Another pause. But I need to know that you'll hear me out before you decide what to do with what I tell you. She looked at Reeves. She looked at the closed door. She thought about Kandahar and about all the years between then and this moment, and about the long, careful shape of a buried truth that had just tonight, in this hangar, begun to come back to the surface. Talk, she said. William Carver's voice was the kind of voice that had given orders for so long it had forgotten how to ask. Even now, when he was supposedly the one reaching out, supposedly the one with something to correct, there was a texture to his words that assumed compliance. Monica heard it immediately. She had grown up around men like that. She had served under men like that. She knew the difference between a man who wanted to make something right and a man who wanted to manage a situation. And right now she was not entirely sure which one was on the other end of this call. You have 2 minutes, she said. Start with Kandahar. A brief pause, not surprise, recalibration. The procedure you performed on Sergeant Webb in 2011 was documented in full by your commanding officer, Major Gerald Sykes. His after-action report included a detailed account of the technique, your improvised modifications, and the outcome. That report went up the chain. Another pause. It didn't stop there. I know it didn't stop there. I was told to forget it happened. You were told that by Sykes. What you weren't told is where the report went after him. Carver's voice dropped slightly, not with shame, with the careful management of a man measuring what he was releasing. It went to a medical research division within Army Medical Command, a division that was, at the time, under contract review for a proprietary surgical protocol they had been developing for 5 years. A protocol that was about to receive significant Defense Department funding. Monica felt something cold settle in her chest. My procedure competed with theirs. Your improvised field technique, performed once under combat conditions with no equipment, produced better outcomes than their 5-year, $40 million development program. Carver let that sit. So yes, it competed with theirs. She turned away from Reeves slightly, pressing the phone harder against her ear. And you were involved in that program. I was the program's primary civilian contractor, Defense Medical Solutions. We held the patent on the surgical approach they were developing. His voice had the flatness of a confession being delivered without feeling. When Sykes's report reached the right desk, I was contacted. I was asked whether the report created a liability for our contract. I said it did, and the report was reclassified. Monica said nothing. She was very still. I was 44 years old, Carver said. I had 200 employees and a contract worth $160 million. And a sergeant in the field had a technique that made yours obsolete. Yes. So you buried it. Yes. She exhaled once through her nose, short, controlled, the kind of breath that was holding something much larger behind it. 12 years, Mr. Carver. 12 years that procedure has been sitting in a classified file, while soldiers in the field were being treated with an inferior method. I know. People died. The line was quiet. I know that too, he said, and for the first time, something in his voice shifted. Something cracked slightly at the edge of the control. I've known it for a long time. Reeves had moved closer. He was watching her face and reading it the way someone reads a situation, assessing, calculating, deciding whether to intervene. She met his eyes and shook her head once. Not yet. Why now? She said into the phone. Why tonight? Because Daniel Holt nearly died tonight because of what I did 12 years ago. Because the surgical team at Benning was working from a protocol that I helped ensure would dominate field medicine for the last decade. A protocol that is categorically inferior to what you developed in that tent. And they could not save him with it. His voice was steadier now, flatter. And because I've been watching what's been done with your career, Miss Stewart, I know about Mercy Heights. I know about Franklin Hurst. She went very still. What do you know about Hurst? I know that he received a very quiet recommendation from a former Army Medical Command administrator about 8 months ago. A recommendation to watch your work closely and document any deviation from protocol. A beat. That administrator was a colleague of mine from the Defense Medical Solutions contract. The cold in her chest spread upward. They've been watching me, she said. It came out quieter than she intended. They've been managing the situation, Carver said. You've been in civilian medicine for 7 years, and in that time, you have never stopped working the way you worked in Kandahar. You don't follow inferior protocols when you can see a better path. And that makes you a liability to anyone who has built a career on the protocol you should have replaced 12 years ago. Reeves had heard enough to understand the shape of it. His jaw was tight. He reached for her arm. She held up her finger again. 1 more minute. What do you want from me, Carver? I want to give you the full file. Everything. The original after-action report, the reclassification order, the communications between Sykes and my office, the Defense Medical Solutions contract documentation. He paused. And I want to testify, formally, to the Army Medical Command Inspector General, and if it comes to it, to Congress. She almost laughed. Almost. That's very generous of a man who spent 12 years doing nothing. It is not generous, it is long overdue. And I understand that those are not the same thing. His voice was level. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Miss Stewart. I'm asking whether you'll use what I give you. Monica looked at the ceiling of the hangar. She looked at Reeves. She looked at the door behind which Daniel Holt was alive. Because tonight she had done something that 12 years ago, someone had decided the world was better off not knowing about. Send me the file, she said. All of it. Tonight. I'll need a secure channel. She looked at Reeves. Hold on. She lowered the phone. He wants to send documentation. He says he has the full file from Kandahar, the reclassification order, everything. He needs a secure channel. Reeves stared at her for a 3 count. Then he said, Tell him to hold. I'm going to make a call. He stepped away, pulling out his own phone. She brought hers back to her ear. Hold on his end. Understood, Carver said. She stood in the corridor with the phone against her shoulder and the silence of the hangar around her, and tried to process the shape of what she'd just been told. 12 years. The math of 12 years. How many soldiers had gone through the field surgical system in 12 years? How many of them had needed exactly what she had developed in Kandahar? How many of them had been treated with something inferior and hadn't made it and would never know why? She could not do the full calculation. She didn't let herself try. It was the kind of arithmetic that could swallow you whole if you let it. Kowalski appeared from the direction of post-op. Captain Holt's pressure is holding at 97/64. Drainage output is normal. Dr. Osei says he's responding well. Good. She focused on Kowalski's face. He looked like he might cry, and he was working very hard not to. He's going to be okay. Yeah, he cleared his throat. I've been with him for 14 months, 3 deployments. He stopped. He's the best officer I've ever worked under. Tell him that when he wakes up. Don't wait until it's polished. Just tell him. Kowalski nodded. He was very young, suddenly, under all the fatigue and training. You know him, he said. You called him Daniel. Not Captain Holt, Daniel. She looked at him. We served together. A long time ago. Was he always like that? That stubborn? Like his body just refuses to give up? She thought about Daniel Holt at 26, bleeding from a shrapnel wound in his shoulder that would have sent most men to the ground, still giving orders, still moving, operating on a will that seemed to run on something deeper than adrenaline. Yes, she said, he was always exactly like that. Reeves came back. He held out his phone toward her with a number on the screen. Tell Carver to encrypt and transmit to this address. Tell him if the file is incomplete in any way, the offer is off the table and I take what we already have directly to the IG. She related. Carver said, understood. Give me 40 minutes. You have 30, she said, and hung up. Reeves looked at her with something that was either respect or assessment and might have been both. You believe him? I believe he's scared. Scared men are often truthful in ways that comfortable men aren't. She handed back his phone. What I don't know yet is whether he's scared of his conscience or scared of something else. Meaning? Meaning someone sent that recommendation to Hearst 8 months ago. Someone is still actively managing this. And if Carver is reaching out tonight, the night I saved Daniel Holt, in a way that's going to be very hard to keep quiet, it might be because he's realized the cover is about to come off anyway, and he wants to be on the right side of it before it does. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You'd have made a good intelligence officer. I'm a good nurse, she said flatly. That has always been enough. He almost smiled. He didn't quite make it. Come with me. I want you to hear something. She followed him to a small communications area. He sat down at a terminal, typed a sequence of credentials, and pulled up an audio file. He glanced at her before he hit play. This was recorded 6 hours ago, before we came to get you, before Holt was transferred from Benning. He played it. It was a phone call. 2 voices. One she didn't know, smooth and administrative, the kind that belongs to people who manage things from a distance. The other voice she knew, Franklin Hearst. She went rigid. The administrative voice said, The Stewart situation is handled then, and Hearst said, terminated as of tonight, no appeal filed yet, and I'll make sure the documentation is clean. And the other voice said, make sure it stays that way. She cannot be allowed to continue operating outside sanctioned protocols, not with what's coming. And Hearst said, understood, completely understood. Reeves stopped the playback. Monica stood very still. What's coming, she said slowly. That phrase is why I'm showing you this. Reeves turned in his seat. We pulled that call because Hearst's line is monitored. It has been for 3 months, since we started tracking movement around the Defense Medical Solutions successor corporation. They restructured after the original contract ended, went private, new name, but same principles. And they are currently 6 weeks away from submitting a new proposal to the Defense Department for a next-generation field surgical protocol contract. He let that land. Worth, this time, approximately $400 million. Monica sat down. She sat down because her legs made the decision before she did. They needed me out of civilian medicine before the proposal went in, she said. Because if I'm practicing, there's a record. There's a trail of outcomes, and my outcomes prove their protocol is inferior. That's what we believe, yes. Hearst knew. He wasn't just enforcing protocol, he was... She stopped. He was participating in this. We don't know how aware he was of the full picture. He may have only known that he was supposed to find a reason to remove you. That's not better, Colonel. That's just a different kind of coward. She pressed her hands flat on her thighs, the same gesture she'd used in the helicopter, grounding herself. How long have you known about this? The full picture? About 3 weeks. Daniel Holt's injury accelerated everything. We needed to move before we were ready. And you came to me tonight because you needed me to save him. Yes, but also because the moment I performed that procedure in a military context, in front of your people, with witnesses and documentation, the suppression of my work becomes significantly harder to maintain. She looked at him directly. I was never just the only person who could save him. I was also evidence. Reeves held her gaze. He didn't flinch. Both things are true. I want that acknowledged. It's acknowledged. In writing. Miss Stewart, in writing, Colonel, tonight, because I have been used by systems before, and I have learned, at significant personal cost, that verbal acknowledgement is worth exactly nothing when the situation changes and the people who made the promises are suddenly unavailable. He was quiet for a long moment. The terminal hummed. Somewhere in the hangar, someone was running through a checklist in a low voice. I'll draft it myself, Reeves said. Tonight. She nodded. She stood back up. There's something else, Reeves said. She stopped. The Army Medical Command wants to formally adopt your procedure, document it, test it in controlled conditions, name it, distribute it to every field medic unit in the military. She turned back to face him. What they want to call it, he continued, is the Stewart Protocol. The words sat in the air between them. Monica thought about a flashlight trembling over a surgical field. She thought about a young soldier's heart lurching back into rhythm. She thought about 12 years of other soldiers who had needed that moment and hadn't had access to it. She thought about Mr. Callahan in room 408, alive and complaining about pudding. She thought about the red welt on her neck where Hurst had snapped her stethoscope. They want to give me credit, she said, carefully, like she was testing the edges of the sentence. Yes. After spending 12 years making sure I didn't have any. Reeves said nothing, because there was nothing to say to that. I'll think about it, she said. She walked back toward post-op. She needed to check on Holt. That was the thing that was real right now. The rest of it, Carver and his guilt, Reeves and his complicated honesty, the $400 million contract, and the people who had spent 12 years managing the small, dangerous fact of her existence. That was all real too, but it had an order to it. And the order was this. First, make sure Daniel Holt was stable. Second, wait for the file. Third, decide what to do with the match once she had it in her hand. Dr. Osei was in post-op, reviewing monitors. She looked up when Monica came in. He's doing well, she said quietly. Better than the numbers suggested he should be, honestly. His body is responding. She paused. I think he knows somehow, the way some patients seem to know when the worst is over. Monica moved to the side of the table. She looked at Daniel Holt's face, slack now, still under sedation, but the color was better. The machines above him said the things that machines said when a body was beginning to believe it was going to survive. She didn't touch him. She just stood there. You two have history, Osei said, not prying, just observing. He was a patient once, Monica said. A long time ago. Different circumstances. She paused. He was the first person I saved the way I saved him tonight. Not this procedure, a different one. In a vehicle that had been hit by an IED, with half the medical kit scattered across the road and 30 seconds to make a decision that should have taken 10 minutes. What happened? He lived. She watched the monitor. He went back to active duty 3 months later. I got a card. No return address, no name, just a line that said, "Thank you for not giving up." She was quiet for a moment. I kept it. Osei didn't say anything. She understood the kind of silence that was not emptiness, but holding. Monica's phone buzzed. She looked at it. Denise. She had forgotten about Denise. She had been gone from the hospital for more than 2 hours, and Denise was going to be either furious or terrified, and knowing Denise, probably both simultaneously. She stepped into the corridor and answered. "You are alive," Denise said immediately. Not a question, an accusation. "I'm alive. Do you have any idea how many people have been in this hallway in the last 2 hours? Security, Hurst's assistant, 2 people I have never seen before asking extremely specific questions about you in a very vague way that made me very nervous. A beat. Also, Mr. Callahan has been asking the nurses if anyone has heard from you, which at any other moment would be sweet, but right now is just adding to my anxiety. Tell Mr. Callahan I'm fine. Monica, what is happening? She thought about how much to say, not because she didn't trust Denise, but because some things needed to be contained until they were ready to be used, and a phone call from a hospital floor was not a container. I can't explain everything right now, but I need you to do something for me. Obviously, what? I need you to document everything that happened tonight, from the moment Hearst came to the station this evening, his words, his actions, the physical contact with the stethoscope. She kept her voice low. Exact language, if you can remember it. Time-stamped if possible. Your own observations as a witness. A pause. Monica, how bad is this? It's complicated, but I'm going to need people who were there to say what they saw. She paused. You're the best witness I have. Then I'm your witness. No hesitation. Not even a breath of it. That was Denise, 22 years of nursing and a backbone that could hold up a building. I'll start tonight. Thank you. Come back in one piece. Always. She hung up. Reeves was in the corridor behind her. He had a tablet in his hand. Carver's file came in. She turned. Already? 24 minutes. Either he had it pre-packaged, which means he's been planning this longer than tonight, or he worked very fast, which means he's more scared than he sounded. Reeves turned the tablet toward her. I've had my communications officer do a preliminary review. It's real. The original after-action report is in there, Sykes's full documentation, the reclassification order with signatory names, and 3 years of internal defense medical solutions communications. He paused, including one email from 12 years ago in which a named executive specifically uses the phrase, and I want you to hear this exactly, this field improvisation cannot be allowed to establish a competing standard of care. She read those words on the screen. A field improvisation. 12 years. Buried as a field improvisation. The thing that had saved Marcus Webb. The thing that had saved Daniel Holt tonight. A field improvisation that had been inconvenient for someone's contract. She handed the tablet back to Reeves. I want a copy of everything, she said, and I want it transmitted to 3 separate, secure locations simultaneously. Not just yours, mine, and someone outside the military entirely. You want a civilian backup. I want to make sure that if something happens to me tonight, or tomorrow, or next week, this file does not disappear the way the last one did. Reeves looked at her with that expression again, the one that was assessment and respect running together at the same speed. Who do you have in mind? She thought for exactly 3 seconds. There's a journalist. She covered military medicine for the Post for 8 years. She's independent now. I've met her once, at a conference in 2018. She gave me her card and said if I ever had something worth saying, she would listen. You kept the card. I keep everything. Reeves nodded slowly. This will accelerate things significantly. Once a journalist has the file, the window for a quiet resolution closes. Good, Monica said. I'm done with quiet resolutions. He looked at her for a long moment. The hangar hummed around them. The machines in post-op beeped their steady reassurances. You understand what this becomes, he said. It's not just your job back. It's not just a wrongful termination case. It's a congressional investigation. It's procurement fraud. It's potentially criminal charges against people who have been very comfortable for a very long time. Yes, she said, they'll come after you. They already did. They sent me a termination letter and a man who snapped my stethoscope off my neck and smiled about it. She held his eyes. I am not afraid of them, Colonel. I am very tired of pretending to be manageable. Something finally broke open in Reeves's face. A real expression. The first truly unguarded one she had seen from him all night. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was something close to relief. Like watching a person who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time finally find somewhere solid to set it down. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I'm glad it was you who answered that phone call tonight." Her phone buzzed again. Different number this time. She looked at it. It was a text message. No name, just an address in 3 words. "We need to talk." She showed it to Reeves. He read it, his jaw tightened. "That address," he said slowly, "is Franklin Hurst's home." Monica stared at the message. Hurst, who had fired her this morning, who had smiled while he did it, who had been on a recorded phone call 6 hours ago, making sure the documentation of her termination was clean. That man had her number. That man had sent a message at 2:17 in the morning asking her to come to his house. "He knows something happened tonight," she said. "He might know more than that." Reeves was already reaching for his own phone. If he's connected to the people running the contract play, they may have told him about the procedure, about Holt. "Or he's scared," she said, "same as Carver. Or both." She looked at the message again. "We need to talk." 3 words from a man who this morning had pressed a termination letter against her chest and told her she was done. 3 words that could mean anything, and all of the things they could mean were the kind that had edges. She typed back, "Not tonight. Talk through my attorney." She sent it. Then she went back into post-op and stood beside Daniel Holt's bed and watched his heart beat steadily on the monitor and stayed there until she was sure he was going to be fine. Because that was the work. That was always the work. And no matter what was happening in the corridors and the phone calls and the classified files and the fractured empires of men who had spent 12 years afraid of her hands, the work was still the work. His eyes opened at 3:41 in the morning, slow and disoriented at first, the way eyes open when the body is coming back from a long distance. Then they found focus. They found the room, the ceiling, the machines. Then they found her. His mouth moved. No sound because of the oxygen, but she read it. She had always been able to read faces. He said, "You again." And despite everything, despite the 12-year-old burial and Carver's confession and Hurst's 3-word message and the $400 million shadow hanging over all of it, Monica Stewart almost smiled. "Me again," she said quietly. Daniel Holt's voice came back slowly, the way all things came back after surgery, in pieces, rough at the edges and uncertain of itself. By 4 in the morning, he could manage a few words at a time. By 4:30, he was asking for water. By 5, he was asking questions. "How bad?" he said. Not how bad was it, just how bad. The way soldiers talked, stripped down to the essential word. "Bad enough that you need to stop talking and let your body work," Monica said. "How bad?" he said again. Flat, insistent. He had always been insistent. She remembered that. She looked at him. He deserved the truth. He had always been the kind of person who could hold the truth without letting it crush him. "Your pericardium had progressive constrictive scarring from previous trauma that your clearance physical missed. You've been operating on a compromised cardiac structure for at least 2 years without knowing it. The training accident pushed it past the point of standard intervention." He processed that. She watched him do it, the way his eyes went slightly unfocused as the information settled in. "Previous trauma, the IED. Yes. They cleared me. I know." A long pause. "Someone should have caught that." "Someone should have," she agreed. She wasn't going to soften it. He hadn't asked her to. He turned his head slightly and looked at the ceiling. "What did you do?" "Something I developed a long time ago. Something that should have been in every field medic's training kit for the past 12 years. She kept her voice level. "It wasn't, but it is now." He looked back at her. His eyes were sharper now, the sedation receding, the person coming back into them. "That sounds like there's a story behind it." "There is, and you're going to hear all of it, but not at 5 in the morning when you're 12 hours post-procedure." "Monica." He said her name with the particular weight of someone who had earned the right to use it. "Am I going to be okay?" She held his gaze. Yes, your pressure is stable, your drainage output is normal, and your heart, once it has room to work, is stubborn enough to compensate for the rest. You're going to need a real surgical follow-up and a reevaluation of your service status, but you are going to be okay. He exhaled. It was a long exhale, and somewhere in it was everything he wasn't going to say. All the fear he'd been keeping down while he was conscious enough to keep it down. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. We have a lot of complicated things to discuss when you're stronger." Define complicated. The kind that involves congressional oversight and a very unhappy contractor. He almost smiled. It pulled at his face and then stopped, like his body wasn't quite ready to commit to it. "You always did find the most interesting trouble." "I learned from observing the people around me," she said. He closed his eyes. She stayed until his breathing evened out into sleep. It was 5:14 in the morning when she walked back out into the corridor and found Reeves sitting against the wall with a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold, running his thumb across the screen of his phone with the focused distraction of someone who wasn't reading what was on it, but needed something to do with his hands. He looked up. "He's stable? He's sleeping. He's going to be fine." She leaned against the wall beside him. The exhaustion was full in her body now, the deep kind, the kind that lived below the muscles, down in the place where the decisions are made. "Has anything come in?" "3 things." He put the phone away. First, Carver's attorney made contact with the Army JAG office at 0400. Carver is formally requesting cooperation status. He wants protection in exchange for full testimony. He moved fast. "He's scared. You called it." Reeves turned his cup in his hands. "Second, the journalist you mentioned, Rebecca Hale." Monica went very still. "I haven't contacted her yet." "No, but she contacted us." He let that land. "She sent a message to Army Medical Command's Public Affairs Office at 0345. She said she has been independently investigating Defense Medical Solutions' successor corporation for 4 months. She says she has documentation of irregularities in their Defense Department proposal process. And she says she has a source inside the organization who told her 2 days ago that something was about to break." Monica turned to face him fully. "She's already on it. She's been on it. She just didn't have the medical piece. She didn't have Kandahar." He paused. "She asked specifically whether Monica Stewart was involved in whatever happened tonight." The corridor hummed. Somewhere down the hangar, the night shift was changing over. Low voices, equipment being checked. "Someone told her my name," Monica said. "That's what I think too." "Carver?" "Possible. Or his source inside the corporation has their own reasons for wanting this to come out." Reeves set his cup down on the floor. "The point is, Ms. Hale already has infrastructure. She already has a story. What she needs is you." "And the third thing?" He didn't answer immediately. He picked up his cup, looked at it, set it down again. Franklin Hurst was found in his car outside Mercy Heights Hospital at 4:50 this morning by a security guard. He was sitting in the driver's seat. He had not been in an accident. He was not injured. A beat. He was crying. Monica said nothing. Security asked if he needed assistance. He said no. He sat there for another 20 minutes and then he drove away. Reeves finally looked at her. "We think he knows the walls are closing. We think someone in the network contacted him tonight after word got out about Holt and the procedure. And whatever they told him, it scared him badly enough that he drove to the hospital at 4 in the morning and sat in the parking lot. He sent me a message. We need to talk." "I know. Did you respond?" "I told him to go through my attorney." Reeves nodded. That was correct. But Monica, he used her first name. It was the first time he had, and she registered it. Hurst is the weak link. If he breaks before we're ready, before the file is properly positioned, and Carver's testimony is formally on record, the people above him have enough insulation that they walk away clean. Hurst takes the fall, they restructure again, and the contract proposal moves forward on a delayed timeline. She understood immediately. You need him to hold until the documentation is locked in. I need him to either hold or break in the right direction, meaning toward formal cooperation, not toward a panic confession that their attorneys can discredit before it reaches anyone who matters. You want me to talk to him. I want you to consider it. He assaulted me. He fired me. He participated in a coordinated effort to remove me from practice to protect a fraudulent government contract. She said it plainly, not with heat, just with the precision of someone laying out a case. And now you want me to manage him carefully so he breaks in a useful way. I want you to decide what you're willing to do. Reeves met her eyes. I am not ordering you. I am giving you information and respecting your judgment. She stood very still for a long moment. The way she stood when she was working through something, not frozen, but moving inward, running through it, the same way she'd run through the surgical sequence in the helicopter. Set up a secure call, she said finally, through your channel, recorded, with legal present on our end. Not his house, not alone. And if he says anything that deviates from full honest disclosure, I hang up. Agreed. And I want my attorney on the line. I am not walking into a conversation with that man without legal representation, even on the phone. I'll arrange it, he stood. Get some sleep first. 2 hours, I mean it. You are not going to be effective in a high-stakes conversation on zero sleep, and this conversation is going to require everything you have. She wanted to argue. Her body said don't. 2 hours, she said. They found her a cot in a side room of the hangar that smelled like machine oil and recycled air. She lay down without taking off her shoes. She was asleep in 4 minutes. She dreamed about Kandahar, not the procedure, the before, the particular quality of the dark outside the tent, the sound of distant ordnance that had become so ordinary it was closer to weather than threat, the feeling of being very far from anything she had known before, and very exactly in the place she was supposed to be. She had been 29 years old. She had been afraid every day. She had also been more alive than she had ever been before or since, in the deep, specific way that happens when your skills are exactly matched to the need in front of you. She woke up at 7:12. Kowalski was outside the door with coffee that was actually hot. She took it without commentary and drank half of it standing up. How is he? She said. Captain Holt is asking for actual food and arguing with Dr. Osai about whether scrambled eggs count as a medical necessity. Kowalski's face had changed overnight. The exhaustion was still there, but under it was something lighter. She says it does. I agree with her. Tell him soft foods only, and he's not to give Dr. Osai a hard time, or I'll come in there myself. He'll enjoy the threat more than it deters him, but I'll pass it along. She almost smiled. She finished the coffee. Where's Reeves? Communications room. And your attorney is on the line. A Ms. Franklin? She stopped. Judith Franklin? Yes, ma'am. Monica had called Judith Franklin twice in the last 7 years. Once when a hospital administrator had threatened her with licensure action over a documentation dispute, and once when a pharmaceutical rep had made a comment that required a formal response. Both times, Judith had been the sharpest thing in the room. She was 71 years old, had been practicing medical and civil law for 43 years, and had the particular quality of someone who had seen every version of institutional bad behavior and had stopped being surprised by any of it while also never stopping being angry. How did she, Monica started. Reeves contacted her at 6:30 this morning. She was apparently already awake. Kowalski paused. She said, and I'm quoting because I wrote it down because I wanted to remember it, she said, tell Monica that I've been waiting for someone to bring me a case like this for 30 years, so she better not settle. Monica stood in the corridor with the empty coffee cup in her hand and felt something shift in her chest. Not the cold clarity of the surgical field, and not the exhaustion of the long night, but something warmer, the feeling of not being alone. She went to the communications room. Reeves was at the terminal. Judith Franklin's voice was already coming through the speaker, low and precise, going through documentation with the systematic thoroughness of someone who read case files the way other people read novels, for pleasure and for the patterns. "Monica," Judith said, without looking up from whatever she was reading on her end, "sit down. We have a lot to cover." "Good morning to you too, Judith. It will be a good morning when I finish reviewing this file, which is, I want to say for the record, the most comprehensively damning piece of documentation I have seen in a decade of practice. And I once litigated against a pharmaceutical company that had been falsifying trial data for 11 years. A pause. "How are you?" "Functional." "Good. That's all we need right now." Papers shuffled on the other end. "I've read the reclassification order and the Defense Medical Solutions communications. I've read the original after-action report, and I've read the recorded phone call between Hearst and the unknown administrative voice, which Colonel Reeves was kind enough to provide." Her voice was absolutely level. "Franklin Hearst did not just terminate you wrongfully. He participated in a coordinated effort to suppress your professional efficacy in connection with a federal contract fraud. That is not an employment case. That is a civil RICO predicate." Monica looked at Reeves. He raised his eyebrows slightly. He had known. "Can we prove the connection to him specifically?" Monica asked. "The phone call does most of it. The rest depends on what Hearst says when we talk to him." Judith paused. "Are we talking to him?" "That's the plan." "Good. I want him on record today, not tomorrow. Today, before his attorneys have fully briefed him on the scope of what we have. There is a window right now, in these hours, where Franklin Hearst is frightened and not yet fully defended, and that window is going to close." Another brief pause. "Monica, I want to ask you directly, what do you want out of this?" The question landed in the room and stayed there. What did she want? She had been moving so fast since the phone call in the break room, since the helicopter, since Kandahar came back in one night after 12 years, that she had not fully stopped to face that question. She faced it now. "I want the procedure documented and distributed," she said. "I want it in the hands of every field medic in the military, and I want it in civilian trauma training within 18 months. Not as a courtesy, as a standard." She paused. "I want the people who buried it held formally accountable, not managed quietly, not restructured around, accountable." "And Mercy Heights?" She was quiet for a moment. "I want my record clean. I don't want the job back." She surprised herself slightly with that, but it was true. She knew it was true, even as she said it. "I don't want to go back to a floor where a man like Hearst has authority over patient care. I want my license fully cleared and my record corrected, and I want it formally documented that what I did for Raymond Callahan was not a protocol violation. It was excellent medicine." "Done," Judith said, with the satisfaction of someone who has just been given clean timber to build with. "All of that is achievable. Most of it is achievable this week." A beat. "And Hearst, personally, I want him to answer for what he did, to me and to every patient who has been in his facility and been subjected to his judgment about which nurses are allowed to save lives and which ones are supposed to stay in their lane." Her voice was steady. "I don't need his apology. I need his accountability." Judith said, "Then let's build it." They spent 40 minutes on strategy. Judith walked through the legal architecture, the sequence of filings, the connections between the employment claim and the fraud exposure, the way the pieces had to be positioned so that nothing could be quietly settled before the full picture was on the record. Reeves contributed the military documentation framework. Monica filled in the medical details wherever Judith needed them. At 8:57, Reeves's phone buzzed on the table. He looked at it. Hearst's personal attorney has made contact. He's requesting a conversation. "Of course he has," Judith said dryly. "Tell him Miss Stewart is available for a recorded call with full legal representation on both sides at 10 o'clock. No earlier. I want him to spend another hour in that chair first. Reeves related. The response came back in 3 minutes. Confirmed. Monica stood up and walked to the door of the communications room. She needed a moment, just one. She stood in the corridor and put her back against the wall and breathed. The hangar was waking up around her, the day shift taking over, equipment moving, voices in a register that was purposeful rather than urgent. Kowalski appeared. He seemed to materialize whenever she needed someone nearby, which she suspected was not an accident. You should eat something, he said. Probably. There's food in the break area, real food, eggs. He paused. Captain Holt has been informed he can't have them yet, and he has asked me to tell you that he thinks you're being unnecessarily strict. Tell him his opinion on his own post-operative care is noted and overruled. He also said to tell you, Kowalski stopped. He seemed to be deciding whether to continue. He said to tell you that he read your after-action report, the real one, before it was reclassified. He said he read it in 2011 and he never forgot it. Monica turned to look at him. He said he spent years thinking about it, about what you did and why it worked and why no one was using it. Kowalski's voice was very quiet. He said part of the reason he never pushed for early medical discharge after the IED was because he kept thinking if he stayed in long enough, eventually someone would figure out that what you wrote in that report was real. He wanted to be there when it happened. She was very still. He's an officer, Miss Stewart. He could have pulled that file. He could have pushed it upward. He was enlisted when I wrote it. He was Webb's unit. He wouldn't have had access to an after-action report. She paused. And the men above him had made very sure there was nothing to pull. Kowalski nodded slowly. He said one more thing. He said you should know that Marcus Webb is currently serving as a senior field medic instructor at Fort Bragg, and that for the last 4 years, Webb has been quietly teaching a version of your procedure to his students. Not by name, not officially. Just, this is something I learned once that works, and here's how to do it. Monica leaned against the wall. Marcus Webb, who she hadn't spoken to since 2011, who was alive because of a flashlight and a tent, and a decision made in the dark that someone had decided was inconvenient, who had been quietly carrying her work forward in the margins of official training, the way truth sometimes survives when it can't survive officially. 12 years, she said softly. He's been waiting too, Kowalski said. She pushed off the wall. She went and found the food, and she ate. Because Reeves was right, she needed to be functional. She needed to be everything she was in the conversation that was coming. She ate, and she thought about Webb at Fort Bragg and Holt reading her report in 2011, and Callahan in room 408, and the welt on her neck where the stethoscope clasp had broken, and the termination letter folded in her pocket. And she thought about the moment she had understood in Kandahar that her hands knew something that no protocol had given them. And she thought about what it meant that all of those things had led here, to this hangar, to this morning, to 10 o'clock. At 9:45, Judith Franklin said, "Are you ready?" "Yes," Monica said. "He's going to try to minimize. His attorney is going to try to reframe everything as institutional policy enforcement. They are going to use words like process and standard and oversight. Do not engage with those words. Let me handle the legal framing. Your job is to sit in that call and let him see and let the recording capture exactly who he fired and exactly why." Understood. And Monica, if he apologizes, don't accept it. Not on this call. An apology now is a legal maneuver, not a human act. There will be time for human acts later, if he earns them. 10 o'clock came. The call connected. Hearst's attorney spoke first, a man named Galloway with a smooth Philadelphia cadence and the rapid-fire diction of someone accustomed to controlling conversations. He began with procedural language, standard framing. He used the words process and standard and oversight within the first 40 seconds. Judith dismantled each one with the quiet efficiency of someone removing load-bearing walls. Then Galloway said, My client would like to address Ms. Stewart directly. A pause. Hurst's voice came on the line. It was different from the voice in the hallway yesterday, different from the voice on the recorded call. The self-importance was gone, the way air goes out of a tire, not with drama, but with a flat, irreversible deflation. What was left was something smaller, and in its smallness, more honest. Miss Stewart, he said. Dr. Hurst. A long pause. On her end, Judith had her hand raised slightly, a quiet signal. Let him speak. I was told, Hurst said slowly, that you were a liability, that your tendency to operate outside protocol created legal exposure for the hospital, and that it was in everyone's best interest to have a documented termination on file before a certain professional review process concluded. He stopped. I was not told why. I didn't ask why. I told myself it was institutional, that it was my job. Another stop. I understand now that it wasn't. Judith made a small note. Monica said nothing. I also understand, Hurst continued, his voice dropping lower, that the man whose procedure initiated the concern about you is currently in a military medical facility because of something you did last night, something no one else could do. He was quiet for a moment. I was in the parking lot at 4:30 this morning. I sat there because I couldn't figure out where else to go. Judith glanced at Monica. Monica kept her face still. I want to cooperate, Hurst said, fully, with whatever investigation follows. I want to provide names. I want to provide the communications I received, all of it. His voice cracked, barely, just at the edge. I know that doesn't undo what happened. I know saying I didn't fully understand is not sufficient. But I am telling you I did not know the full scope of it, and I am asking for the chance to help correct it. Judith leaned forward slightly and said, in a tone that was professionally warm and utterly immovable, Mr. Hurst, we appreciate your willingness to cooperate. Our office will be in contact with Mr. Galloway by end of business today to outline the formal terms. I want to be very clear that any cooperation agreement will require complete and unredacted disclosure of all communications received regarding Ms. Stewart, all internal documentation produced in relation to her termination, and full cooperation with both the Army Medical Command Inspector General's investigation and any subsequent federal inquiry. A pause. Is that understood? Galloway started to speak. Hurst talked over him. Yes, he said. That's understood. The call ended at 10:22. Judith said, he'll follow through. Men who sit in parking lots at 4:30 in the morning crying have already made their decision. They just need someone to tell them which door to walk through. Monica sat back in her chair. She was thinking about the chain of it. Hurst in his parking lot. Carver in his 40-year-old guilt. Reeves on a rooftop with his debt to Daniel Holt. Webb at Fort Bragg teaching something in the margins. Holt reading an after-action report in 2011 and holding on to it for 12 years. All of these people orbiting around something she had done in a tent in the dark. Something that someone had decided was too inconvenient to let stand. Something that had nonetheless kept surviving. The way certain things survive, passed hand to hand in the dark, too true to die even when the people with power over it wanted it to. Her phone buzzed. It was Denise, a text, not a call. It said, Mr. Callahan went home this morning. He asked me to give you a message. He said, and I quote, tell her the pudding was never the problem. Tell her I hope the rest of her life is worthy of her. Then he walked out on his own 2 feet. Monica read it twice. Then she put the phone face down on the table and pressed her hands flat on the surface in front of her and stayed very still for a moment, just breathing, just being in the particular silence that comes after something that has been in motion for a long time finally begins to settle into the shape it was always going to be. Reeves said quietly, Rebecca Hale wants to speak with you. Today, if possible. Set it up. And the Army Medical Command wants a formal debrief on the procedure. They want to begin the documentation process for training integration. After I sleep, tonight. And Judith wants to file the wrongful termination motion tomorrow morning. Good, he looked at her. You're very calm. I'm exhausted, she said, and I'm calm, both things. She looked at the wall. I've been fighting sideways for a long time, adjusting and managing and making myself small enough to stay in rooms where people like Hearst got to decide what medicine was supposed to look like. She turned to him. I'm done adjusting. From here, I'm only moving forward. Reeves nodded. It was a nod that meant something, the kind that comes from a person who has watched someone arrive at something true. Down the corridor in post-op, Daniel Holt was awake and eating something Osei had finally permitted, asking questions in his rough, direct way, putting the shape of the night together piece by piece, the way his mind had always worked, relentlessly, without self-pity, toward the next true thing. Monica stood up. She had people to talk to, and documents to sign, and a story to put on the record that had been waiting 12 years to be told. She had a journalist, and a general, and an attorney, and a room full of military personnel who had seen her hands do something last night that none of their protocols had been able to do. She had work. She always had work. She walked out of the communications room and down the corridor, and for the first time in a very long time, she walked without checking over her shoulder. Rebecca Hale arrived at the hangar at 11:47 in the morning with a recorder, a legal pad, and the particular energy of someone who had been sitting on something important for a long time and had finally been given permission to open it. She was 53, compact, with sharp eyes that moved across a room the way a journalist's eyes moved, cataloging, categorizing, deciding what mattered before anyone had said a word. She shook Monica's hand and held it for a beat longer than a standard greeting. I've been trying to find you for 4 months, she said. You found me, Monica said. They sat across from each other at the table in the communications room, with Judith on speakerphone and Reeves present at Monica's request, not because she needed protection, but because he was part of the record, and the record needed to be complete. Hale set her recorder on the table. I want to start at Kandahar, she said. Not at Mercy Heights, not last night. I want to start where this actually started. 2011, Monica said. Yes. Monica looked at the recorder. She had spent 12 years not talking about 2011. She had filed it in the part of herself that was not for public consumption. Not because she was ashamed of it, but because she had been told, clearly and without ambiguity, that talking about it would cost her. And it had cost her anyway. It had cost her in the slow, quiet way that buried things always cost. Not in a single payment, but in years of compounding interest. She began to talk. She told it the way it had happened, in the order it had happened, without dramatics and without minimizing. The tent, the flashlight, Marcus Webb's blood pressure dropping in the time it took to think about what to do next. The moment she understood that the standard approach was not going to work and that the next decision was entirely hers to make. The feel of the tissue under her hands, the adjustment she had never been able to fully explain in academic language, because it was not academic knowledge. It was physical knowledge, the kind the body holds separately from the mind. Hale did not interrupt. She wrote on her legal pad and her recorder light stayed red, and she let Monica speak until Monica stopped. Then she said, when Sykes told you not to discuss it, what exactly did he say? He said, this stays in this tent. He said the after action is going to reflect standard intervention. He said, you did a good job, and the good job ends here. Monica's voice was flat, not emotionally flat, factually flat. He said if I documented the actual procedure, there would be questions about scope of practice, about whether a nurse had practiced medicine without a physician present, and those questions could follow me. He framed it as protection. But it wasn't. It was the opposite of protection. It was the removal of the evidence that I had done something worth protecting. Hale made a note. And you believed him? I was 29 years old and he was my commanding officer, and I had just done something I'd never done before in a situation that still had my hands shaking. And yes, I believed him. Or I believed enough of it to comply. She paused. I also believed that even if I hadn't complied, the report would have been altered. Sykes had already decided what the official version was going to be before he spoke to me, because he'd already been contacted by Defense Medical Solutions. That's what Carver's file shows, yes. Hale looked at her steadily. You've had 12 years to be angry about this. Yes. Are you? Monica considered the question honestly. I'm angry at the waste of it. At the soldiers who needed what I developed and didn't have access to it. At the version of myself that spent 12 years in civilian medicine, trying to practice excellent medicine inside a system that had been quietly rigged to limit me. She looked at Hale directly. I'm less angry at the people involved than I probably should be, because anger at individuals is a distraction from the structural problem. The structural problem is that a medical technique that saves lives was suppressed to protect a contract worth $160 million. That is what I want your readers to understand. Hale wrote for several seconds. Then she looked up. What do you want to happen as a result of this story? I want the Stewart protocol formally adopted by the Army Medical Command and integrated into field medic training within 1 year. I want it available to civilian trauma centers within 18 months. I want the Inspector General investigation to reach its natural conclusion without political interference. And I want it on the public record that the suppression happened, who did it, and why. She paused. I also want Marcus Webb's name in the story. He's been teaching this procedure in the margins of official training for 4 years because he knew it was real. That deserves to be part of the record. It will be, Hale said. The interview ran for 2 hours. By the end of it, Hale had enough for a feature, and Monica could see in the journalist's face the particular, focused brightness of someone who had found the center of the thing they had been circling for months. As Hale packed up her recorder, she said, "This publishes in 4 days. My editor has already cleared the front page." She met Monica's eyes. "There will be pressure to kill it. There's always pressure to kill it. Will it hold? I've been doing this for 26 years, and I have never had a story this clean. Every claim is documented. Every source is on record. The only way to kill it is to discredit you personally, and given what you did last night in front of multiple military witnesses, discrediting you personally is going to be a significant challenge." Hale paused. "Are you ready for what comes after it publishes?" Monica thought about Dr. Franklin Hurst pressing a termination letter against her chest. She thought about a classified file sitting in a drawer for 12 years. She thought about the red welt on her neck and the folded single page and the sound of rotor blades growing louder than everything else. "I've been ready," she said. "I just didn't have the ground under me yet." Hale nodded. She left. Reeves leaned back in his chair and ran a hand across his face. He looked like a man at the end of something long. "How are you doing?" he said. "Ask me in a week." "I'm asking now." She looked at him. "I'm okay. I'm more okay than I've been in a long time." She meant it. "What happens to Carver?" "He'll cooperate and receive a reduced exposure. Probably no prison time, given his age and the voluntary nature of his disclosure. Fines. Formal debarment from federal contracting." Reeves paused. "The principals at the successor corporation are a different story. The IG has 3 names with significant exposure. Their attorneys are already in contact. And Hurst? His attorney filed the cooperation documentation 40 minutes ago. He's going to testify to the full chain of communication he received. In exchange, the wrongful termination judgment will remain civil rather than becoming criminal." Judith's voice came through the speaker. "Monica, he will also be required to formally submit a corrected record to the state nursing board, clearing your license of any notation related to the Callahan incident. That happens before anything else." "Good. And there's the matter of Mercy Heights itself," Judith continued. The hospital board has been informed of the situation. I received a call this morning from their general counsel. They are, in the words of their counsel, extremely motivated to reach a resolution. Monica said nothing. Judith said, they are prepared to offer reinstatement at senior nursing level, back pay for the period of wrongful termination, a formal public correction of the incident report, and a restructuring of their clinical oversight protocols to ensure that experienced nurses are not disciplined for evidence-based interventions that fall outside outdated procedural frameworks. A brief pause. Also a settlement in the mid-six figures, but frankly the protocol restructuring is worth more than the money. I don't want the job back, Monica said. I said that clearly. You did. The protocol restructuring and the public corrections stand regardless of whether you return. I've made that a non-negotiable condition. Another pause. But Monica, I want to make sure you've thought through what you do want to do professionally from here, because you are about to be, in 4 days when this story publishes, the most recognized name in American field medicine. The question of where you practice next is not a small one. She had thought about it. She had been thinking about it since somewhere between 4 in the morning and the moment Kowalski had told her about Webb at Fort Bragg, in the quiet places between all the urgent things. I'm not going back to a hospital floor, she said, not as a staff nurse, not under an administrative structure that gives a Franklin Hearst authority over clinical decisions. She paused. I want to build something, a training program, field medicine, emergency intervention, specifically designed around the reality that the best decisions in critical care situations are made by the people closest to the patient, not the people furthest from it. Judith said, that's going to take funding. I know. Reeves cleared his throat. Army Medical Command has already, informally, discussed a partnership structure. If you're willing to work with us on the formal protocol documentation and training integration, there's an infrastructure there that could support a civilian training component as well. Not under the Army's full authority, Monica said immediately. I've seen what happens to good medicine when it operates entirely inside a military bureaucracy. Independent, with a formal partnership agreement. You hold the clinical direction. We provide resources and distribution. She looked at him. Is that a real offer or a preliminary conversation? It's a real offer. I've been authorized to make it. He met her eyes. We spent 12 years accidentally proving that we make worse decisions about field medicine when we operate without your input. I'd like to spend the next decade proving the opposite. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Monica said, I want Webb involved. Formally. He's been doing this informally at Fort Bragg for 4 years, and he should be compensated for it and given the resources to do it properly. I'll make it happen. And I want civilian trauma centers included from the beginning, not as an afterthought, not as a secondary phase. From day one, this is not a military-only program. Agreed. And I want editorial control over the training materials, not committee control, not oversight board control. My name, my authority, my call on what the clinical standard is. Reeves looked at her for a long moment. There will be pushback on that from certain quarters. I'm sure there will be. Are you agreeing to it? Yes, he said, I'm agreeing to it. She looked at Judith. Get it in writing. Already drafting, Judith said. It was mid-afternoon when she finally walked to the post-op area and found Daniel Holt sitting up in his bed with significantly more color in his face and a look in his eyes that said his body had decided firmly in favor of continuing to exist. He had managed to get hold of a physical copy of the morning edition of the base newspaper, which he was holding with both hands despite the IV line in his right arm, because Daniel Holt had never in his life done a thing the comfortable way when the slightly uncomfortable way was available. He lowered the paper when she came in. I hear you've been busy, he said. Moderately. Reeves told me about the offer. He told you quickly. He told me because I asked. Holt set the paper down. His voice was still rough from the ventilator, and there were shadows under his eyes that would take weeks to clear. But the essential quality of him, the thing that was relentlessly and specifically Daniel Holt, was fully present. Are you going to take it? I'm negotiating the terms. Of course you are. A pause. You know what this means. The program, the protocol, your name on it. I know what it means. Does it feel the way you thought it would? If you ever let yourself imagine it? She considered the question seriously, the way he had asked it seriously. No, she said. I thought if it ever came out, if the work ever got recognized, I would feel vindicated, like something had been corrected. She paused. What I actually feel is tired and focused, and like there's a very large amount of work to do, and I want to get started on it. He nodded slowly. That sounds right. Vindication is for people who needed other people to confirm they were right. You always knew you were right. That's an uncharacteristically philosophical statement for someone who just had open chest surgery. Near-death experiences sharpen the mind. He looked at her. Monica, I've been thinking about what Kowalski told me, about Webb, about the fact that 4 years ago Webb started teaching the procedure on his own because he couldn't let it die. His voice was quiet. That's because of you. Because of what you did in that tent, and because of the fact that even in a classified after-action report that was supposed to disappear, the truth of it was so clear that a man who experienced it couldn't leave it behind. She sat in the chair beside his bed. Kowalski told you what he told me. He tells me most things. A beat. I need you to know something. I've been in the military for 14 years, and I have believed, most of those years, that the system, for all its failures, fundamentally wanted to do right by the people it was supposed to protect. He stopped. His jaw tightened slightly. What I've learned in the last 12 hours is that the system will protect itself before it protects anything else. I've known that intellectually. I didn't know it personally until now. Welcome to what nurses have known for their entire careers, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I want to be part of it, the training program, whatever it becomes, whatever you build. When I'm cleared, he paused. Not in a supervisory capacity, not as the military's representative, as someone who can tell the people you're training what it means from the other end of the procedure, from the table. She looked at him. That's not a small thing you're offering. I know. It means being public about what happened to you, about what the Army missed, about the IED clearance that should never have happened. I know that too. His voice was steady. I've been playing things quietly for a long time, Monica. I'm done with quiet. She heard her own words from earlier in his mouth and almost said so. Instead, she said, when you're cleared medically and when the timing is right, yes, I want you there. He nodded. He picked up his newspaper again. She recognized the gesture. He was done with the emotional portion of the conversation and moving back to information processing, which was exactly how his mind worked and always had. Go sleep, he said, without looking up. You look terrible. Thank you for the feedback. Seriously, you've been awake for over 24 hours. Whatever is left to do today, Reeves and Judith can handle it. He turned a page. You won't be useful to anyone tomorrow if you collapse tonight. She stood. Good advice from a man who argued with Dr. Osei about scrambled eggs. I stand by that position. The eggs were a medical necessity. She left him there, reading, alive and steady, and exactly himself. She slept for 4 hours in the same side room with the machine oil smell, and this time she didn't dream at all. She woke at 7 in the evening to a message from Judith that the cooperation documents from both Hearst and Carver had been filed with the IG's office and the Army JAG, that the formal partnership agreement draft would be ready for her review in the morning, and that the Mercy Heights General Counsel had agreed to every term without modification. She sat on the edge of the cot and read the message twice. Every term, without modification. She thought about Raymond Callahan walking out of Mercy Heights on his own 2 feet that morning, and about the note he'd left, and about the 14 years she had spent on that floor, giving everything she had to work that mattered inside a structure that had, all along, been quietly organized against her. She typed back to Judith, "Proceed on all fronts, and thank you." Then she called Denise. Denise answered on the second ring. "You're alive again." "Still alive. Are you going to tell me everything?" "Not tonight, but soon. In person." She paused. "Denise, I need to ask you something." "Obviously, yes," Denise said, before Monica had asked it. "You don't know what it is." "Monica, I have known you for 11 years. Whatever you're about to ask me, the answer is yes. I'm building something, a training program for field and emergency medicine. Independent, with a military partnership but civilian authority. I need someone who has spent 2 decades watching what actually happens to patients when the people closest to them are empowered to act, and when they're not." She paused. "I need someone who can look at a training protocol and tell me when it's going to fail in the real world." A long silence on the other end. "You're asking me to leave Mercy Heights," Denise said. "I'm asking if you want to." Another silence. Then very quietly, "I've been there 22 years. "I know. I've wanted to leave for about 12 of them." Denise's voice shifted. "Are you serious about this? Not a plan, not an idea, an actual thing?" "Judith is drafting the partnership agreement tonight. Rebecca Hale's story publishes in 4 days. It's an actual thing." The silence this time was different. It had a quality of weight being set down. "Then yes," Denise said. "Obviously yes." After the call, Monica stood in the quiet of the side room and held the phone in both hands and let herself feel, fully and without management, what was happening. Not the legal architecture of it, and not the logistics of the training program, and not the 4-day countdown to a front-page story, but the human weight of it, the real weight. 12 years of a life built carefully inside constraints that had been designed to hold her. 14 years at Mercy Heights, giving excellent care in a system that had been, at its edges, organized against excellence. A procedure developed in a tent in the dark that had kept surviving because truth has a stubborn persistence that institutional suppression cannot fully overcome. A man alive in post-op because she had answered a phone call in a break room instead of letting it go to voicemail. She put the phone in her pocket. She walked out into the hangar. Kowalski was near the entrance, talking on his own phone in a low voice. He saw her and lifted his chin in acknowledgement. She returned it. Reeves was at the communications terminal, finishing something. He looked up. "Feeling better?" "Yes." She meant it fully this time. "I want to talk about the timeline for the training program launch. Not tonight, tomorrow morning first thing. I'll have the structure ready. And I want to contact Webb directly, not through the Army, directly. I can get you his number." "Good," she paused. "James," his first name, the first time she had used it. He registered it, she could see that. "Thank you for coming to get me last night, for being honest with me about what you needed, for the writing." She met his eyes. "I know last night was not simple for you." He looked at her for a moment with that expression she had come to recognize, the one where the controlled surface and the real person underneath it came very close together. "It was the most important thing I've done in a long time," he said. "Possibly ever." She nodded. She walked to the main entrance of the hangar and stepped outside into the evening air and stood there for a moment, feeling the temperature on her skin and the ground under her feet and the particular quality of a sky that had gone from dark blue to the first edge of orange on the horizon. She thought about the termination letter. It was still in her pocket. It had been in her pocket through all of it, through the helicopter and the procedure, and Carver's confession, and Holt's eyes opening in the dark, and Hale's recorder, and Hurst's broken voice on the phone. She had carried it through the entire length of a night that had changed everything. She reached into her pocket and pulled it out. She unfolded it. She read it one final time. Failure to adhere to established medical protocols. Risk to patient safety and hospital liability. 1 page. 14 years. She folded it carefully and held it in her hand for a long moment. Then she put it back in her pocket. Not to keep it, not out of anger, but because some things deserve to be held long enough to understand what they actually are. And what this was, she understood now, was not an ending. It had never been an ending. It had been the door that opened because there was no longer any point in keeping it closed. 4 days later, Rebecca Hale's story ran on the front page of the Washington Post under a headline that occupied 6 column inches and a photograph of Monica Stewart that had been taken, with her permission, in the hangar where Daniel Holt was still recovering. The headline said, "Nurse fired for saving a life. The procedure she invented 12 years ago has been saving lives ever since. Someone made sure you never knew about it until now." The story was read by 4 million people on the first day. By the end of the week, 3 members of Congress had called for a formal oversight hearing. The Inspector General's office confirmed it had opened an investigation. Defense Medical Solutions' successor corporation's contract proposal was formally suspended pending review. William Carver gave his first on-record statement to the Post's follow-up story. Franklin Hurst resigned from Mercy Heights Hospital and issued a public statement that contained the word "sorry" 11 times, and not once in a way that could be construed as legally consequential, which was exactly what his attorney had built it to be, and exactly what Judith had expected. Marcus Webb called Monica from Fort Bragg on the evening the story published. The call lasted 47 minutes. She could not remember the last time a phone call had lasted 47 minutes for a reason that wasn't logistical. He said, "I've been carrying this for 4 years." She said, "I know. You can put it down now." He said, "I want to teach it properly, with the full anatomy, the full sequence, the way you know it." She said, "That's what we're building. I need you there." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what Webb means as a name? It means someone who weaves things together." A pause. "I always thought that was a funny coincidence." "It's not a coincidence," she said. In the weeks that followed, the Stewart Protocol Training Initiative took its first formal shape. Monica had the authority, Webb had the institutional presence, Denise had the clinical reality check, Reeves had the infrastructure, and Holt, when he was cleared for limited activity 6 weeks after the procedure, had the thing that none of the rest of them could provide: the first-person account of what it meant to be on the other side of a life saved by someone who refused to wait for permission. On the morning the first training cohort convened, 12 field medics and 8 civilian trauma nurses, in a facility that had been deliberately designed to feel like neither a military base nor a hospital, but something between, Monica stood at the front of the room with a marker in her hand and a diagram on the board behind her. She looked at the 20 faces in front of her. She thought about a tent in Kandahar. She thought about a flashlight. She thought about 12 years of silence and one night that broke it open. She uncapped the marker. She said, "Let's start at the beginning." And Monica Stewart, who had been fired on a Tuesday and had saved a life by Wednesday, and had spent the rest of her life building the thing that no one had been able to bury for good, began to teach.